Hampton Court Palace, home to Henry VIII. His actions will have an everlasting impact on this country. Reformation, dynasty, and execution. And by his side, Anne Boleyn, well known as Henry's second wife. But it's this resolute queen who deserves a second look, for it was Anne who set these remarkable events in motion. Henry grew up Catholic, and like other European rulers, he accepted the Pope as the head of the Catholic Church. In 1509, he married Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess. This formed an alliance with Spain. At the time, across Europe, a different type of Christianity was beginning to spread: Protestantism. Protestants believed that you didn't need the Pope in order to worship God. Henry defended the Catholic Church and the Pope against these new ideas. After many years of happy marriage, Catherine and Henry had one daughter, Mary, but no son. Henry was desperate for a male heir. He felt that a son would enable a lasting Tudor dynasty, but that a daughter would not be as stable. Eventually, Henry began to convince himself that his marriage to Catherine was not valid. Meanwhile, in 1514, a young woman called Anne Boleyn travelled to France. Anne was intelligent. She arrived at the French court, ready to learn the skills and mannerisms to become a lady. Anne was stylish, sophisticated, and had an engaging personality. And in 1522, she arrived back in England to become lady-in-waiting to Catherine of Aragon. By 1526, Henry had fallen in love with Anne. He wanted to marry her, so he asked the Pope for an annulment or separation from Catherine. But the Pope said no. While Henry thought about what to do next, Anne gave him a book, Obedience of a Christian Man by William Tyndale. But this was not just any book. It criticised the Pope and spoke of a simpler form of Christianity, Protestantism. Protestants believed that you could have your own relationship with God without the Pope or the Church in the way. Could this be the answer to Henry's problems? 1531, a dramatic move. Henry sent Catherine away from court. His alliance with Spain was now ruined, and in 1533 he married Anne Boleyn. Henry declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England. This meant that the Pope no longer had control over him or his kingdom. This is known as the English Reformation. It was an important change that would lead to centuries of upset, suspicion, division, and death. Henry was now in full control, and he needed to make sure that everyone knew it. He and his chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, sent men to close down Catholic monasteries. The Crown made huge profits from taking their treasures and selling their land. Henry brutally fought off Catholic rebellions in the north and in Ireland and seized even more power. Henry also authorised the Bible to be translated from Latin into English, meaning that even more people could now access God themselves. And what about Anne Boleyn? She supported Henry's religious changes, but more than that, she was determined to be involved in Reformation politics herself. Anne was outspoken and had strong opinions. However, some thought that she was arrogant. She started to make enemies, including Thomas Cromwell. Anne and Henry had one daughter, Elizabeth, but heartbreakingly, Anne had suffered the loss of several other pregnancies. Without a male heir, Anne and Henry's relationship began to break down. Other men around her, including her own uncle, saw this as an opportunity to ruin Anne and to get more power for themselves. Then, In 1536, Henry and his council make some serious accusations. They accuse Anne of seeing other men, and worse, plotting to kill the king. Anne was put on trial. She spoke bravely and denied all of the accusations. There wasn't much evidence against Anne, but she was quickly found guilty of treason and sentenced to death. Anne Boleyn was beheaded at the Tower of London. This would mark the first time that a Queen of England had been executed. Anne's tragic tale, set against the backdrop of the English Reformation, reveals some of the most crucial events in English early modern history. Henry's legacy is well known, remembered for his 6 wives and his need for a son and heir. Henry's decision to break from the Catholic Church created deep and long-lasting tensions. And what about Anne's legacy? Reformist, intellectual, brave, and one of the most pivotal women in English history. Anne never did have the son that Henry so desperately wanted to continue his dynasty, but she did give birth to Elizabeth. And it would be Elizabeth, their daughter, who would grow up to be the strong ruler that Henry had hoped a son could be. She would be one of the longest reigning monarchs this country would ever see, and it would be Queen Elizabeth who would secure and expand the famous Tudor legacy.